Hi everyone, it's really great again to be here. And as I said last week, we're a community of people gathered online and in person around the transforming friendship of Jesus. Encountering Jesus changes everything. And as we walk with Jesus through life, that encounter begins to change all the different parts of our life. So we're a community gathered around the transforming friendship of Jesus. And we're in the second week of a series called Living the Unhurried Life. Have you ever noticed how busy life is, or is that too obvious of a question to ask? Like, how is life so busy? Because it really, really is. And often we can kind of feel powerless to change that. And yet Jesus says he can teach us to live in a way that we can find rest as we enter that apprenticeship with him and learn from him. You know, back in the 1960s, there began to be this explosion in labor-saving devices and automation and time-saving devices. And all the experts thought that in the future, in other words now, everyone would be working a lot fewer hours. Let me read you a quote from Mark Cormer's book, which is one of the resources that I've relied heavily on. And he said, one famous US Senate subcommittee in 1967 was told that by 1985, the average American would work only 22 hours a week for 27 weeks a year. Everyone thought that the main problem in the future would be too much leisure. When I was young, I remember when we got our washing machine, and it had to be rolled over to the sink and manually filled and manually emptied. We went to the shops every day because there weren't supermarkets and the fridges were tiny. No one had a tumble dryer or a dishwasher. I'm not sure if anyone in Ireland would have had a microwave. Now everyone has all these time-saving devices, but we're so much busier. We've all these labor-saving, time-saving devices, but we're living like we're juiced up on crack cocaine or something. Everyone is so busy, so tired. Like, let me ask you, have you ever been impatient with the microwave because it's taking so long to heat your dinner? 3 minutes. Are you typically in a hurry in traffic? And if someone is slow to respond when the light turns, you just get a little bit annoyed? Or do you ever get annoyed because the person in front of you in the queue at the checkout, they're just slow unpacking their stuff and packing stuff? Or do you get annoyed when you can't skip the ads on YouTube? Or if you cycle to work or cycle to school, do you know exactly to the second when the lights are going to change so you can get right out there? It's kind of like, does time not know we have so much to do? So many places to go, so many people to see, so much work to do, so much caring for our families to do, so many programs on Netflix to see, so many Facebook entries to make, so many Instagram posts to read, so many photos to take before I can get a good one that's good enough to upload. Surely time knows I have so much to do. I don't have any time to waste. And lots of people kind of have this image, the way we live is, you know, the way people are out jogging on the roads, and when they're jogging they come to a traffic light and they're stopped, but they still jog in place. They don't stop. They have to be ready when the light goes. I feel like that's the way many of us live. We're jogging in place, ready to pounce. And what's interesting is the solution to our busyness isn't more time, because what happens if we had more time is what we always do, is we fill up whatever time we have with more stuff to do, more stuff we must do. So the solution to the problem of busyness isn't more time. If it was, then microwaves and tumble dryers and dishwashers and home delivery would mean that we would live so much more relaxed, such a slow pace of life compared to our parents and grandparents. But it's the opposite. So the solution to hurry sickness or busyness isn't more time. So then the question is, well, what is the solution? And interestingly, the Bible has the answer. This is from Ephesians 5:15 and 16. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Now, different translations translate that differently. The solution to our busyness or hurriedness is to make the most of every chance you get, the message. Or King James says redeeming the time. Or the English Standard Version says making the best use of the time. And redeeming the time, that is the idea of gaining possession of time, or of buying time, or choosing what to do with the time that you have. That it has that something you have a choice over. It's not gaining possession over the amount of time, but how we spend the time we have. You see, time, your time and my time, is something we only have so much of. It's limited. There's only 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and then there's sleep, work, eating, friendships, hobbies, exercise, Pinterest. What's the saying? So much to do, so little time. So we've no control over how much time we have. As Jesus said, no one could add a single hour to our life. The only thing we have control over is the other side of the equation, what we do with our time. And there's so much to do. What we do with our time is the only thing that we have control over. And Paul is saying here in these verses, exercise that control wisely. Spend your time wisely. You know, I remember when I was a child, we'd sometimes get some money, maybe 3 or 4 pennies to spend at the sweet shop. And man, we thought so long and hard about how to spend the pennies, like our lives depended on it. So we'd go down to the shop and stand in front of the counter with all the different sweets, and like, what would you do? Would you buy like 4 penny toffees, or would you buy a macaroon bar and a spearmint bar, or a sherbet fizz and 2 penny toffees? We just were thinking it was so important. We didn't want to get it wrong. If it was hot, would you buy a loop-to-loop ice cream? It was a big decision, because we didn't know when we were going to get 4 pennies again to spend in the shop. So what we were doing with our pennies, Paul is telling us to do with our time. Make the most of it. And to spend your time wisely, you have to do at least 2 things, and 2 things that are hard to do, especially in this culture. The first thing is you have to slow down. And the second thing is you have to simplify your life around what really matters. And slowing down, that's just another way of saying eliminating hurry from your life. And slowing down, whether you're a Christian or not, that's a good thing for everyone to do. It's good for your mental health, it's good for your relationships, it's good for your body, because our body is hurt when it's constantly filled with too much adrenaline. So slowing down is good whether you're a Christian or not. But as Christians, it's also good for our souls. That part of us that connects most intimately with Jesus. Like we saw last week, there's a disconnect between love and busyness. Actually, you can't do Jesus in a hurry. If you want to do Jesus, if you want to be with Jesus, learning to be like Jesus, doing what Jesus did, you just have to slow down. In emotionally healthy spirituality, they say the only type of spirituality that is healthy is slow down spirituality. There's no such thing as a microwave for spirituality or connectedness with Jesus. You know, Billy Graham, maybe the most famous evangelist in the 20th century, late in his life, he said he had 3 regrets. He wished he'd travelled less, he wished he'd studied more, and he wished he'd prayed more. And you know what he's saying? He regrets his hurry. He wished that he'd lived a more slowed down life. If the speed that you're living at, that I'm living at, doesn't change, and we don't slow down to make the most of the time that we have, the time that we're given, and if we get to live to be 100, what regrets would we have if nothing changes? Would we regret the amount of time we spent on Facebook and Pinterest? Would we regret the amount of time we spent watching football on the telly? Or the amount of time worrying about how we looked? Would we think, I wish I spent less time on? You know, there's a great picture of the hurried life in playgrounds on Saturday mornings in local parks. Usually the dad is there with the little child or the couple of little children because he's given the mom a break. And some dads, they're just playing with their kids, they're investing their time in their kids, they're spending their time wisely. But some dads, their kids off doing whatever, and the dad's on the phone. Maybe reading the news or the sports or keeping up with those emails. The hurried life, missing what's really important. And like we've said in previous times, you can't find time. You have to make time. To get to know Jesus deeply, to learn how he gives rest, requires time alone with him, time in his word, time with his people. Now, this busyness, it's a big deal. We're all living in it. It's in our culture. But if you sense, as we've been going through this, that your time with Jesus needs to increase, you can't do that and still do all the things that you're doing. Like, for example, I knew for years I wanted to pray more. I just felt like God was wanting me to spend more time with him. But I just couldn't figure out how. My day was already full. I was constantly tired. So getting up early wouldn't work. I'd just fall back to sleep. Then one day I thought, if I go to bed earlier, I could get up earlier. I know it kind of seems obvious, but it was a light bulb moment for me. It took me a long time to figure it out. But I used to like watching, the 9 o'clock movie or the film that starts after the news at 9. I used to like that, watching that, but that would get over quite late, long after 11. Or Champions League would be on, and if we went to extra time, that would go really, really late. So I decided, you know what? I'm not going to watch the 9 o'clock movie. I'm not going to stay till the end of the Champions League. And I did that so I could get up earlier to be with Jesus that little bit longer in the morning. And then I found, even though I was getting up earlier, I still fell asleep. So I decided to follow Jesus' example, because it sounds like he went outside to pray a lot. So I would get up early and walk and talk to Jesus. And I got all the rain gear that's needed, so I'm out there in the mornings. I got up early. To get up early, I had to go to bed earlier. Who would have thought you could live without the 9 o'clock film or Champions League? Paul is saying, be wise with how you use your time and simplify your life around what really matters. And as Christians, what really matters is our connected with Jesus and with people. You see, implied in that, in organizing your life around what really matters, implied in that is that you have limitations in your life. You can't do everything. We're finite beings with God-given limitations. I will never sing like Matt or Ben. With all the training and practice, I'd still sound like someone who's strangling a cat. I love all the stuff about astrophysics and space-time continuum and dark matter. It's really fascinating to me. But if I lived to be 1,000 years old, I would never be able to understand E equals mc squared, or how light is both a particle and a wave. To be honest, I'm trying to impress you there now. I probably won't be alive in 30 years. My life has limits. And in Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, they talk about embracing those limits. The limits of our personality and our temperament. The limits of our season of life, maybe because we have young children, or aging parents, or our own aging. Being married has limits. Being single has limits. Being a single parent has limits. And then we've emotional and physical and intellectual limits and capabilities and capacities. Limits aren't bad, but they are reality. And the biggest limit we have is time. No one, Jesus said, can add even an hour to our lives. So if you live to 90, that means you will have lived 7,700, let me try that again. If you live to 90, you will have lived 788,400 hours. About 750,000 hours, give or take. And you can't even add a single hour to that, Jesus says. That means that you can't even add, just about, give or take, 1/10,000 of 1% to the length of your life. So making the most of your time is really important. And we're really busy. But you know what? At least for me, some of my busyness is self-inflicted. Like, I've watched 6 seasons of Harry Bosch. I've watched all the seasons of What About Saul in about 3 months. I watch a lot of soccer, rugby, GAA, all of Modern Family. Actually, my kids introduced it to me one Christmas Eve, and we stayed up till 2 in the morning watching them. Actually, if I'm honest, I've rewatched Modern Family many times. I've watched Lord of the Rings several times. Every Christmas, Die Hard. Father Ted countless times. The IT Crowd countless times. MasterChef, Bake Off. Need I go on? And I can't even add 1/10,000th of a percentage to the time I have. Why would I watch something I have already watched? Why would I watch so much? You know, the surveys have found that this is for Americans, but it's probably true for all of us, that between TV watching and social media, we spend about 6.5 hours a day, about 2,500 hours a year. Imagine what else you could do, what else we could give thousands of hours a year to. Imagine. But never mind thousands of hours, because none of us will do that. But how about just 5%? 5% of the time we voluntarily spend in front of a screen, which is about, for the average person, 20 minutes. That's all 5% is. So you'd still have 95% of social media and Netflix and TV, but you just shaved off 5%, 20 minutes every day. Not reducing our work time, not away from our time with the kids, just away from the screen. And you spent that time reading your Bible, reading Christian biographies, going to growth group. What might that do for your soul? What might it do for your relationship with Jesus? You see, we can't do everything, be everywhere, experience everything, despite bucket lists and all these things. No matter what the adverts say on telly or what social media tell you. But we do live in a time when there's an explosion of choices. Should I go to Barcelona this weekend? Or binge on that new series of What About Saul? Or plan a new course of study? These are all good things. But every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to everything else we could do with that part of our time. And Paul says, spend your time wisely. We have God-given limits, and we must slow down if we want the life that Jesus offers. Some areas we have no choice. We have to go to work, and maybe it's a job we don't like, but we still have to go, and maybe we're really tired in work. We still have to do that. We have to change children's nappies. But this thing called time, there is a lot of it in our lives where we do have choice over. When I see the amount of time I spent in front of the screen. But we have to change something. Just that 5% maybe is enough, at least for now. Could I challenge you this week? Now, this will take some courage, if you're brave enough, to do one thing this week. Actually, it'll probably be 2. But the first thing is, keep track of your social media and TV watching this week. Netflix, Prime Video, whatever, all that stuff. Just keep a note of how much time you do, if you're brave enough. And then bring that to this verse that we've been studying. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. There is a part of this that is in our grasp to do. But like I said, it's not easy. So let's just ask Jesus to give us the strength and the fortitude to follow through on that decision, to actually shave off 5% of our social media time so that we can direct that towards time around Jesus, however it is, Bible study, time in growth group, or reading Christian biographies. So let's just pray. Lord, I know there's many times that I've sensed you inviting me to spend time with you, and I've spent it in front of the screen. And I say I'm too busy or too tired. And yet you say being with you gives rest. Rest to our souls. So Lord, would you teach us? Would you lead us? Would you help us make those choices to take a little bit more control over the time that we can control, to spend it wisely. In Jesus' name.